Ready to rock and roll?
Just make sure our mics are.
You got us? You got a good sound check?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right, good.
Well, Raul, welcome back, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one again because we had you on originally, got your whole life story. Then I put the post out to help out any law enforcement or veterans that have businesses or anything that I could help with, and you reached right out again.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good time.
Episode 29, I believe you were.
Yeah, it's been maybe a year ago now. Or
Close,
not
yeah.
quite?
You were in the early days, and
Yeah.
so, but yeah. So I want to recap your law enforcement experience and just a
Yeah.
little background before we jump into what you're doing now for obviously the law enforcement community and just the community in general as far as
Yeah.
firearms training, weapons training, and all that good stuff. So, I guess we could start. What the hell? Oh, first. Loaf of bread from the Sour Bee. So the girls cook every
All right,
guest.
that
you
looks really good.
You
Looks
get to go
tasty.
home. Yeah, it's our chocolate lovers. So
It's gonna be hard to eat and talk at the same time.
yeah,
though.
I know, right? I wish we've actually thought about it, but I feel like the whole half the episode would just be us eating bread. And then we got the War Machine, which he's a Marine, and
Yeah.
he got out. He actually became a cop, got shot in the line of duty, and so he started Platoon Cigars. So I don't know if you're a cigar guy, we'll send you home a cigar. Then obviously you get a Wild Chaos hat as long
Wow,
as
that's
everybody goes.
awesome.
So yeah, a little bit's
Looking forward to
changed
that, yeah.
changed since the last time we came on, but. Dude, Raul, welcome back, and I guess let's jump right into it. And what the hell made you want to be a cop and start this path?
Yeah, well, I started because my dad was in law enforcement.
Okay.
And I can't remember if I told the story last time I was on here, but
We got a lot of new listeners and a
Yeah.
lot of growth, so I mean, feel free to recap anything, and if you already told it, let's do
Yeah.
it again.
All right. Well, my parents both from Mexico. My mom and dad came here. They were they're farm workers, working in fields and so forth. Eventually, my dad started working at J.R. Simplot down there in the Burley area. But my dad had some friends that were in law enforcement, and he thought, man, these guys are really cool. He's like, they don't beat you up and steal your money like in other countries, right? So
right.
my dad found out that they had a reserve program, so he goes down to apply for this police reserve position, and they told him, we can't hire you. You're not a U.S. citizen. My dad was here on work visas and so
Yep.
forth, but so he decided to go to school, and take his night classes and so forth, so that he could get his citizenship. And eventually got his citizenship, went back, got hired. And,
How long did that take? Do you know? Because I hear sometimes it can take years.
Yeah, I think it was probably easier back then.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking back in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So I think things were a little bit different back
Mm-hmm.
then. And then, but yeah, he got on as a police reserve, and so a lot of his friends were, police officers, some reserve, some full time, and that just kind of piqued my interest from, being a young kid.
Yeah.
That's
Got to be pretty cool to watch your parents, I mean, literally live the American dream, coming here, starting out working, you said Burley
Yeah.
area, and then for him to be able to be connected, get in the community, see what those guys were doing as far as the volunteer side of things, get his citizenship, and then he ends up getting brought on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally from start to finish of, I mean, what everybody comes.
Yeah, it's American dream.
It is
and
the
then
American
my
dream.
mom, I don't want to leave my mom out of it.
Yeah.
But, my mom became, she was doing farm labor work too, and she's just like, I want to do something better.
Mm-hmm.
And she went on to become a registered nurse.
Really?
Yeah, she ended up having to go back to high school because she didn't have a high school diploma. She went to high school. She was like in her 20s. She was like the oldest high school student there.
Because you weren't doing anything online. So she literally went back to
Yeah,
high
she
school.
went back to high school.
Good for her.
Got her high school diploma, went on to college, and became a registered nurse, and
Good for
retired
her.
doing that.
How many siblings do you have?
I have two.
Two?
I'm right in the middle. Got a younger brother and an older brother.
So they all watched all this.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, what an example for your parents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
To
pretty
be
awesome.
able to leave a legacy like that and to show you guys like, hey, if you want it, let's just go get it.
Yep. And then I went into law enforcement. When I went to college for a couple years and
Yeah.
got a 2-year degree, and I said, that's enough for me. But school wasn't.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Rick's College it used to be, which is now BYU, Idaho.
Oh, okay.
It was Rick's College in eastern Idaho, and then went there for a short time, and then started my law enforcement career down in the Burley area, and continued down at CSI, College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls there.
So when you started, what was the process back then to? I mean, that's little town living out there. So is it pretty simple?
Yeah,
or
I don't think it's changed too much.
No?
They still, typically come in, fill out your application, do a quick interview just to kind of see if you fit with the culture of the agency.
Okay.
They have you do usually a written test. Where it's just basic math, English stuff.
Okay.
And then they do polygraph test, background. Um, they do financial background, check your credit history, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So
So there's no academy out there.
there was an academy. They sent me once. I mean, that was
Oh,
the hiring
okay.
process. Once you get
Okay.
hired, you get hired on, and at the time, I think it's still the same in Idaho. You can work as a police officer up to a year before you go to the police academy. So they kind of do in-house
Really?
training, yeah. Because some of
Really?
the small agencies can't afford to just
Send you?
send you
Yeah.
until they try to figure out their their work schedule. They just don't have the people to do it.
No
And
kidding.
so at the time,
That's interesting.
I got put with a full-time police officer for heck, probably just a couple of weeks, and
Oh,
then
before you went to the
and then they
academy?
sent me out to the police academy. Yeah.
Where'd you go? Out down
Yeah,
here?
they send everybody here to Meridian to
Okay.
the police academy. I would say the majority of police officers in the state all come here for their
Oh.
academy.
What's the academy like?
Back then it was only like 6 weeks.
What's it now? It's like 18 or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think 16 or 18 weeks.
Okay.
And
What the hell? They just it's 6. You said 6 weeks.
yeah, it was like 6 weeks, and then you come back, and then they put you through an on-the-job training program with another full-time officer where you respond to calls for service, and you're basically just on-the-job training.
So you're a full blown cop in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
I feel like that is like crash course. and
It is crazy,
Just
yeah.
learning the basics.
It's crazy, and especially when you're like, I think I was 22 years old when I first started, and you just have like no life experience. You go to a family fight, and you're trying to talk to a couple who's in their 40s or 50s.
You're a child.
Yeah, about a domestic dispute, and you're trying to resolve a situation. You don't even have any life experience. I was like, I barely had 2 girlfriends.
I never thought of it like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you see some of these cops now. I just got pulled over recently, and the guy that walked up to my window, I looked at him and was like, I wanted to be like, God damn, how old are you? But that's probably not the way to start the conversation. He was a super cool guy, especially being a motorcycle cop. I feel like you're 100%
Oh, yeah.
getting a ticket every time, but he was super cool. But yeah, I looked at him, I was like, God damn, like, dude, you didn't even have a beard yet. You look like a child. So.
Yeah, I look back going, man, I was pretty immature. It's like it's really hard to give people advice when you don't have any life experience.
We're
when you're-
trying to put your authority out there. These probably these old timers, and down there you run
yeah.
into some old drunk rancher. Just
Oh,
tells
some
you to,
ranchers, yeah. Sometimes those were the tough ones, And if you had a water dispute, man, those were. I remember they were telling me.
Oh.
I remember being told early on, it's like, be careful when you go to water dispute because people get killed over water disputes. Here in Idaho, you got ranchers fighting over water and stuff like that. And
I've never even considered that. I mean, I know it's a thing. I mean, it's a big ordeal, but I didn't really even realize from a law enforcement side of things that you instead of domestic, you're worried about going to a water dispute.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Did you ever deal with any guys that were pretty?
yeah, we did.
Yeah?
Yeah, early on because we worked, down in the Burley area. It was pretty rural, a lot more than the Boise area. But even here, when I started, working for Ada County, we still had a lot of rural areas that we'd respond to, and we'd have some water disputes with neighboring ranchers. Somebody would shut off a gate up, down up the canal somewhere, and this guy's not getting his water, and
I mean, you're right. People will definitely get shot
Yeah.
over that.
Well, yeah, it's their livelihood.
livelihood.
Yeah, it's their livelihood. They have to feed water to their farms and their ranches and so forth. So yeah,
Water's life for those guys.
yeah.
Do you remember your first call on your own?
I remember one of my first domestic disputes.
How was that?
And I had to make an arrest, and I was working down in Hayburn, and which is right next to Burley, small little town there, and remember the chief he'd reach out to like the sheriff's deputies and say, hey, Garcia's working by himself tonight because sometimes I would be the only one working. He's like, hey, if he gets a call, make sure you guys go help him. And then
Really?
A friend of mine was a state trooper. He'd show up to help me on stuff, but went to a domestic dispute and had to arrest this guy. And the guy's just sitting in his chair. He's probably 45-year-old guy just sitting in his chair. And told him he's under arrest. He's like, nope, I'm not going. And he's sitting just like I am here, just sitting back.
And you're 22, 23?
Yeah, I'm like 22. And I'm like looking at the other guys. It's like,
what
am
do
I supposed to do? They were like, all right, here you go. They just kind of keep pointing, go, well,
Go get him.
go get him. He's under arrest. So I remember grabbing him by his wrist, and he pulled back and ended up pulling my mace out and macening him, in a small little confined area.
Nobody wins.
It was not a good thing because then all of us got it,
Yeah.
But we ended up having going down to the ground. The other guys, jumped in to help out, and we finally got him cuffed up and off to jail. But yeah, I look back and I was like, wow, that was a a lot of inexperience on my
Yeah.
part, you know. But
Well, now looking back, you're like, God, I did everything wrong, or could have done it so
oh,
much differently.
I probably could have talked to the guy a little bit more, you know. But who knows, you know? It's always that guy's choice.
For
You know,
sure.
when we give somebody a lawful order, it's up to that person. You know, we respond based on their response.
For
you know.
sure.
So if we tell somebody, hey, you're under arrest, turn around, put your hands behind your back, and they don't do it, well, then we got to try something else. You know, you can only talk to the guy so long.
Yeah.
It's still their choice.
Yep. Well, how was the tempo then in 2000? I mean, obviously compared to now.
You know, it's just kind of roller coaster. Some days there was not much going on, and you know, it'd be a few traffic stops here and there, or you know, you're profiling cars and looking to see if you can find somebody to arrest, see if they got warrants for their arrest, that kind of thing, or you're just going to domestic dispute, or there's nothing going on. So it just kind of some weeks where you're just slammed, and other weeks there's nothing going on.
So as a cop, and let's say you're just staged and you're parked and you're just watching traffic, what are you looking for to pick out like profiling?
Yeah.
I mean, you're 100% profiling, right? I mean, there's times where I've driven down the road like that. Those dudes got drugs for
Yeah.
sure. As a law enforcement officer, when you guys are sitting and just profiling and watching, what are you looking for in a vehicle? The people, the interaction. Like, what are you trying to pick up on?
Well, first you got to have an actual violation to stop somebody. You got to have probable cause, right?
Okay.
So you're looking for anything, simple things like no front plate, turn signal that's broken, or you know, not using a turn signal when they turn, not coming to a complete stop at the stop sign. Just little things that, hey, now I have a reason to make contact with that person. But obviously, you can go to a four-way stop sign and stop like 90% of the cars that pull up there, right?
For sure.
Because you look at the tires, you're like, oh, those tires are still moving. They
Yep.
might not be moving very fast, but they're still moving. So that's not a complete stop.
Mm-hmm.
So you pull that person over, right? But sometimes it's their behavior. I know a guy who works for Ada County, and he's really good at profiling cars. He goes out on the interstate, and he's stopped people. He's found out they're wanted for murder. They've dead bodies in the trunk, that kind of stuff. And it's all a lot of behavior, right? So maybe somebody's driving down the road and there's a police officer there. People, for whatever reason, a lot of times they switch lanes. They'll turn
really?
signal, switch lanes, or a normal person usually looks over at the police officer and, you know, just kind of glances over. These people just like look straight ahead, like, oh, I didn't see
10
him.
and 2.
Yeah, 10 and 2. Yep.
They don't see me.
So a lot of it's just, you know, little behavior cues like that, you know, not looking or looking.
Looking too much.
Yeah. So just little things like that.
And so that's what you start picking up on it. Then you start just kind of picking apart the vehicle at
Yeah,
that point.
you
And see
got
what
a
you can
reason
find.
to make a stop, and you go up, and then now you're again starting to look at their behavior, their answers. Sometimes you ask somebody a question, they repeat the question, right, because they're trying to
Come up with an
come up
answer.
with an answer. They're trying to give themselves a little bit more time, and so forth. So
Really? I feel watching, you know, obviously Cops growing up as a kid, I still feel like that was one of the greatest shows ever. The majority of stops lead to more. How often, like, so when you see somebody that triggers, like they meet all the checks for you, how often are you finding or escalating violations, I should say? I mean, what's the percentage of that? Or how often does that happen? Or is it just hey, cool, have a nice day type of deal?
yeah, I would say it just depends on the person. I would say I had friends of mine that I worked with that were way better at that than I was.
Yeah.
And but for example, I remember stopping a car for like a taillight out. There was 4 people in the car. I ended up arresting all 4 people because they all had warrants for their arrest.
Really, all
Yeah,
4 of
all
them?
4 people, yeah.
So as a
Driver, front passenger, rear passengers, everybody went to jail just based on warrants because I stopped somebody for taillight out, right?
and that's it.
Yeah. You know, you remember the Oklahoma City bomber?
Yeah.
Right? Timothy McVeigh. When he got arrested, I remember reading on that incident, and he got stopped for license plate violation.
That easy.
Yeah. So I believe, I can't remember if it was a trooper or a deputy who stopped him, but because they stopped him for that, they started asking questions. Oh, this guy seems kind of nervous, and so they start looking into it, and that's how he ended up getting arrested. So
When you pull somebody over, and I just have to ask, I've always wondered this, and let's say you get all 4 guys in that vehicle, a part of me would feel, okay, awesome, I just nailed 4 dudes, but then at the same time, you're like, damn, I have a lot of paperwork to do now. Did you ever like, does
Yeah.
that ever bother you? Or did you ever come across a situation where you're like, just a little weed, like, all right, get the hell out of here?
Paperwork's like the worst thing ever.
That's
you know?
why I ask,
Yeah.
because
Especially somebody like me don't like to didn't like school, you know. But we have some guys, man, they got master's degrees and communication and that kind of stuff. So these guys are just awesome at writing reports. Just
Yeah.
read like a book. But yeah, for me, I was just like that. The paperwork is the worst thing. But for warrants, warrant paperwork is pretty simple.
Okay.
So it was pretty simple. So most of us, if we were going to make an arrest, the warrants were the funnest because they were the easiest to do paper wise.
Really, why is that? Just
It was
simple?
it was just simple warrant. I mean, just what the requirement was just pretty simple. It was basically
No.
saying, hey, you just showed your probable cause, and this is why I stopped the person. Ran his name, and dispatcher said he had a warrant for his arrest. Transported him to the jail without incident.
Got it. Okay. And then you just do your little report on
Yeah.
that. What's a nightmare one that you have to deal with? Is like DUIs or
No,
domestic?
Those are pretty standard.
Are they?
I would say for me, I did not like domestic disputes. I got tired. To me, I just got tired of listening to people. Sometimes I'm like, and it's probably bad to say because they always one of the things I was always taught is you got to remember this is these people's first incident. It might be your 100th, so you're just kind of like rolling your eyes going to this next call. But you got to remember it's this person's first call that they've had to deal with law enforcement or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's a big deal to them. It may not be a big deal to you because you've been to a lot of them, and you got to remember that when you go. And so that's why you got to show some empathy and
For sure.
make sure you're doing a good job for people.
And I could see that, you say it's their first and maybe your 100th. That could be your 10th call of the day, and they get in a fight. But I mean, what's the scariest situation that you find yourself in as a law enforcement officer? Like, as far as domestic, gang related, traffic stops, what is the one thing that every time you're just.
I don't think there's any one thing. I
No?
feel like for me, I always felt like if I got called to a bicycle theft report, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is this where I'm going to get ambushed?
Oh, okay.
And so to me, it was every call, every time I got out of the car, that was just always in the back of my mind. I mean, you got to be able to do that without being overly paranoid, but that always has to be in the back of your mind. Because it's like I've had fights with people at domestic disputes, on traffic stops. Pretty much every call at some point can turn to where you end up in a fight of some sort.
Have you been in full blown fist fights before? How was that? Okay, and I want you to be on. How scary is it? Because I just watched a video the other day it was the court case of a cop that you could hear him like pleading before the guy shot the cop and then got his gun and you could hear the fear in his voice of him fighting for his life. I mean, so when a suspect or any drunk puts their hands on you, I mean, how fast and how scary do you have to react to that situation when you're in a full blown fist fight? Because it's not just two dudes fighting. I mean, you're now. I mean, you got weapons on you. If he gets the upper hand, I mean, you're done.
I can't remember of any like one fight where it was just me and another guy. It was typically always me and a partner.
Okay.
So typically, I was pretty good about like, hey, I'm going to a call. At this point, nobody's dying, so I'm waiting for my backup to get here. And so I was always pretty good about that. We like to do what we call contact and cover. So one guy's making the contact, asking the questions, running driver's license, while the other guy is just going, okay, I'm waiting for him to do something dumb.
Yeah.
Right. And so we always were pretty good about having contact and cover. So pretty much I can't remember of any knockdown, drag out fight that I was in where I didn't have backup with me.
I feel like that's very fortunate to have because I mean, especially some of these rural areas when they don't.
Yeah.
Backup could be 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so scary as a cop to be out there. And, nowadays with cops and the reputation and everything, the whole defund the police bullshit. I mean, I feel a huge part of the community just got turned against law enforcement officers for the agenda. Obviously there's a bad apple in every bunch, and it's with body cams and cell phones now you don't see the good. And I compare it to when we were overseas. I mean, we were helping build schoolhouses and playgrounds and bring kids to school. Then you see one Marine do something stupid, and you're just like, and that's all it was focused on. And so it's like, with
one guy can ruin a lot of work that the other guys have done, right?
And especially when you see good cops, and they're out there working in the community, and they know the people's names, and and the community knows that law enforcement officer. I mean, I grew up in a small town. I mean, we knew all three cops by name, and they'd pull you over and ask you how the game's going to go Friday night and things like that. You know, and like that's
Yeah.
the kind of the community I grew up in.
Yeah.
But obviously, not a lot of people. It's the opposite, and these cops are out here trying to just do their best and to protect and serve. And you have these communities that are just so against them even being there, but they're the first ones that people call.
Yeah.
That's what's wild to me.
Yeah, and I'm lucky working here in Idaho that even during a lot of that stuff, I feel like we still had a lot of support from the community.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd go out, to go get a soda or you go get dinner or whatever, and often I'd go up to pay, and they're like, "Oh, your meal's been paid for," and I'm like, "Well, who did it?" They're like, "Oh, some citizen. You wouldn't even know it was somebody that was eating at the same restaurant you were, and people would buy your dinner."
That's good.
So yeah.
How often were you running into? And this is even though Boise's blowing up quite a bit. When did I mean you probably were out before all of the craziness, but how often would you run into somebody in these small communities that you've arrested, chased, anything like
Yeah.
that? Did it ever happen?
Yeah, actually,
Really?
yeah, it would happen. I wouldn't say it was often, but on occasion you'd run into somebody, or sometimes you just see somebody in the store, and you'd make eye contact and look at you, and like, oh, I think I know that guy, and then you turn and you just go the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But I never had anybody. Um, when I worked down in the Burley area, it was a little smaller, and I remember my wife at the time. She was a nurse, and she was working at the hospital, and she was taking care of some people, and they, for whatever reason, I guess recognized her, knew that I was married to her, and they said something. Oh, we know who your husband is, and we know where you live, like in a threatening way.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Did you go look for them?
Yeah, I didn't even know who they were at the time, but I was just like, whatever. If it happens, it happens. And
Yeah.
I've had remember one time I was involved in an incident, a critical incident with our SWAT team, where we had to shoot and kill a suspect, and that evening we had our detectives calling us saying, "Hey, the guy was part of a gang, and other gang members. The word on the street was now they were looking for, because they put our names in the paper before, in the news before we even got home that night.
Really?
Yeah, and so at the time, it was the philosophy of the agencies like, hey, we need to be transparent. We need to tell everybody everything and tell them who was involved, and they put our names out there, and but we were told, hey, now these gang members are trying to find all you officers who were involved in the incident.
Can we go into that whole incident? Can you talk about that?
Can, sure.
Yeah. So okay, let's start from the beginning. I mean, what led to this incident of a gang member getting shot?
So what happened, back up even before our incident, we had Boise SWAT was looking for a suspect who was wanted for shooting some people and doing a carjacking. And this guy had been on the run for a while. And one of their off-duty detectives had seen the suspect like at a stoplight. And so he gets on the phone and he calls for officers, and they try to make a traffic stop on him. The guy goes into a subdivision and then takes off on foot. And so they put up a perimeter, and they're searching for this guy. And the SWAT team gets called out, and they're doing a yard-to-yard search. And eventually, when they get to the last house, they end up finding the suspect. End up getting in a shootout with the suspect. The suspect shoots two of their officers and one of their canines.
Oh, really?
Ultimately, the dog ends up dying. One of the officers ends up being paralyzed from the shooting, and the other one is in the hospital and is released later. But the suspect was shot and killed, and he was also part of this gang.
What can you name the gang, or you don't want to?
No, I won't.
Okay.
I won't name them,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they were, the local gang.
Yeah.
And later, a couple months later, this guy who was shot and killed, this gang member who was shot and killed by the SWAT team, was one of his buddies was saying, "Hey, I'm going to get revenge on the cops," and he was telling people he had grenades, and supposedly some confidential informants were telling some of our detectives that they'd seen the grenades in his hand, in his possession.
Really?
Yeah.
Here in Idaho?
Yeah.
Did they ever catch him with any of them?
No, not
No?
at the time. So then, my understanding is this guy that had the grenades was supposed to go over to Cuna, and he was going to pick up some meth that was being delivered from some drug cartels. And the detectives have been watching him, hadn't seen him there, and so then they tell some of our patrol guys, hey, if you this guy's supposed to go to this house, pick up some meth. If you guys see him, put a traffic stop on him, see if you can arrest him. One of our patrol deputies, like at 3, 4 in the morning, is watching the house and sees this guy come and go, put the traffic stop on him. The guy pulls over, then takes off again. And during the pursuit, the guy sticks a gun out the window and fires like 10 shots at one of our deputies.
Really?
He pulls into a subdivision, and so they lock down the subdivision. I think there was like 3 entrances, so they lock it down, set up a perimeter, and they call out our SWAT team, which I was on at the time. And we respond, and it was a similar incident, kind of like the previous one. It was outdoor area search. We're searching yard to yard, front yard, backyard, and we have teams on both sides of the street just kind of searching. It was wintertime, fresh snow. We finally get to a certain location where one of the guys looks over a back fence and says, "Hey, there's fresh tracks." And there's a clue. So they follow these tracks, and they finally lead up to a house, to the back door of a house.
Mm-hmm.
So I knock on the front door. Gentleman comes to the door with these 2 little kids, and we're like, "Hey, we just want to make sure you're okay." He goes, "Yeah, I'm watching this on the news," because the news had been out. And he goes, "My wife left to work, and she saw the cops." And he goes, "So I've been just watching this on the news, so I know what's going on." Like, "Well, we have tracks that lead up to your back door, so we want to make sure you guys are okay. Want to make sure you're not being taken hostage." And that was one of our concerns because it was cold out. It was, I believe it was January, February, something like that.
Okay.
But it was really cold, fresh snow. And so we were afraid if this guy's cold, maybe he's out looking for, somewhere to get warm. Because we actually, previous to this, when we first arrived on scene, we got in our armored vehicle and we're driving around and found his vehicle unoccupied. So we knew he was out on foot somewhere.
Okay.
But then I ended up knocking on this door after we'd been searching for, I believe, 3 or 4 hours at the time. And the guy goes, "No." He goes, "I'm fine. There's nobody in our home." He goes, "We haven't seen anything suspicious." And so I let him close the door, and I get on the radio and tell one of the guys in the back. I go, "Hey, this guy says, there's nobody in the house." And the officer in the back goes, "Hey," he goes, "he's in the house." He goes, "Unless a UFO," he goes, "pick this guy up." He goes, "He's in the house." He goes, "Those tracks go right to the back door."
So this father with his 2 kids had no idea this,
Yeah.
I guess, fugitive at the time or whatever you want to call him, is in his own home?
Yep. So then I'm still standing at the front door, so I knock on the door again. I go, "Hey, we need you to come out of the house." He goes, "We need to search your house." He's like, "Well, there's nobody in here." And so, but he reluctantly left. And so we had a perimeter. We had an armored vehicle in the back, one in the front. And so I had propped the front door open so that it wouldn't close.
Yep.
And we put a robot in and kind of went in looking with the camera on this robot and couldn't find anybody in there. Because we didn't want to just rush in there, right? Because he's supposed to have grenades.
For sure.
And the only room he couldn't get in, this robot couldn't get into, was the garage. From the living room or from the inside of the house to the garage. And so we're like, well, we're not going to go in. We're going to have our explosive breachers, breach the garage door, because we're not going to go up there if he's got grenades. So we had to wait on our explosive breachers to.
How long does that take to get a team like that together?
Well, typically, at the time, our explosive breaching program was fairly new, and so they had to actually run back to the magazine to get it. So,
Okay.
but now they carry all that stuff with them. They don't. If they get called out for something, it's brought with them.
Everything
at the time
comes now, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but at the time, so we ended up just setting up a perimeter in the back, and I'm sitting in the back of the armored vehicle, and our guy has a little robot, and he has a little TV screen right on his remote, and he's like, "There he is," and I think he said, "There he is. He's got a gun," or something like that. And so I jump up. I was actually laying on my back because I was like, "Man, my back hurts." Been searching, for 4.5 hours with all my gear on.
Yep.
I was trying to stretch out, so I jump up, I look around the armored vehicle, and I see the guy looking out. And we had a plan. My friend, one of my friends was the driver, and we had a plan. Said, "Hey, if the guy tries to take off like in a vehicle, like he steals their car, he's like, we're gonna ram him." And so all of a sudden we see the garage door coming up,
Oh, really?
and yeah, and you could hear the guy starts up these people's vehicle. He's gonna steal their vehicle,
No
a brand new
kidding.
car.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
and you could hear the engine revving up. It sounded like he just put his foot to the floor with it like in park or neutral, and he slams it into reverse, and he comes out of there, armored vehicle, rams him, and the vehicle flips around, spins around like this towards us and starts coming at us. So we ended up shooting him.
Really?
And, yeah,
No kid.
yeah, multiple officers fired and shot the guy. So
Was that your first involved shooting at that point?
Yeah, where I actually had to fire. I'd been shot at before, but not where I
Returning?
returned fire. Yeah, usually I was just ducking.
Where and I mean, with all this going down, is that father and his kids out of there, or are they kind of
Yeah,
like
they were at the
still?
neighbors next door.
They're just watching this guy, and you guys just pop his garage door and blow that off the hinges, and
Yeah.
then
Well, we actually didn't. We didn't breach the door.
oh, really?
The bad guy just hit the
Opened it?
garage door and tried to escape. So
Oh my God!
yeah,
This guy's just watching.
yeah. And we were like, hey, if this guy has grenades, he's threatened the police. He's threatened that he has grenades, and we were told the CIs had seen them, and so we're like, we cannot allow somebody with grenades to be running around the neighborhood, so we can't allow him to
For
leave.
sure.
So
After, how was that? I mean, obviously, multiple officers fired, but I mean, you're involved in that. How does that, and the reason I ask these questions is it's different from dudes being overseas, right? Like
Sure.
we're fighting a war on their territory. I mean, you guys are home and get to go home every night. How does that affect you, or how does that affect other officers that you've worked with when you guys get involved shootings? I mean, into a shooting at, justified, used clear gun, guy makes a threat, whatever. I mean, it's a completely different world for law enforcement officers. I mean, how is that going home at the end of the night after you just got into a shootout?
well, home, like emotionally at home, you mean?
Yeah.
I think it's different for everybody, but at least for me, the way I looked at it, and there's different career paths that people take within law enforcement, right? Just like probably in the military, you can be a comms guy, you can be a firearms guy, you can be whatever, right? There's 100 different types of things to do. Like in law enforcement, you can be a detective, a narcotics detective, gang unit detective. You can be a property crimes detective or a patrol guy. I kind of chose to do the SWAT and firearms thing, even though I was patrol, but my collateral duties were firearms instructor and SWAT. And so for me, I was always studying that stuff, right? I was always studying armed confrontations, officer-involved shootings. And so I think a lot of it has to do with just your mindset going into it. Have you prepared? I always tell people you can prepare yourself physically, but get stronger and faster by going to the gym. You go to the shooting range and prepare yourself to be a better shooter, faster shooter. But mentally, you have to prepare your mind too by,
For sure.
like I always tell people, you got to be a student of violence, right? If that's what you're going to do, and when you're in SWAT, that's basically what you're training for, to go confront armed people.
Yep.
And so if you don't, it's not like sometimes I wonder why people even do the job, right? Because
For sure.
they probably shouldn't be doing it, but you need to prepare yourself mentally by being a student of violence. Watching body cam videos, reading about armed confrontations, talking to other guys who've been involved in confrontations. I remember going to conferences where people would debrief their shootings, and I would go there just because I wanted to learn about it, right? And so I feel like guys who say, I was so shocked or I was surprised that I was involved in the shooting, I never thought that would happen to me. I'm like, well, your first clue is you put on body armor and a gun and you go to work. That should be your first clue. So it should never be a surprise that it happened to you.
Yeah.
You should be expecting that that's going to happen. I read a book called Terror in Beslan one time. It's about a terrorist incident over in Russia where Chechen terrorists took over a school. And one of the things the author in there says, he goes, in other countries, whether it's a terrorist incident, a hostage situation, or anything smaller, he goes, the people who respond over there are usually like their special forces. They're equivalent of Delta. They're equivalent of Navy SEALs. In the United States, if there's a terrorist incident at one of your local schools, you are Delta for the day.
Yeah.
Right? Delta Force doesn't come to respond to those kind of things in our country.
Yeah.
So you have to prepare yourself mentally to be able to respond to those things, and you have to have the physical skills to go with it. So.
I mean, it's a prime example. We've seen these incidences where there is a school shooting, and I mean, it takes the cops an hour and a half to get ready to breach a door.
Yeah.
I mean, that is an eternity, especially if it's happened in some little Texas town. These guys have never dealt with anything like that in their life. I mean, it's crazy to think like that. You have to be Delta for a day, and half these cops probably couldn't even pass a PFT test if they needed to.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing is, sometimes when I see incidents, like I'm sure probably one of the ones you're talking about happened down in Texas, right? They are on a shoestring budget, they get very little training, but when something happens, they're expected they're expected to respond
tier
like they're a tier one unit,
operator.
like Delta or SEALs or something like that. That's what the public expects. But leading up to it, they don't want to, the cities or the counties don't want to spend the money to give the officers that amount of training, right? You
blows
see a
my
football
mind.
player walking down the street, an NFL football player, and there's $10 million walking down the road, right? Because of all the training that they put into him. You see a Delta guy, if or a Navy SEAL, same thing. You see a cop, oh, there's $100 going by, right? Because
His pistol and body armor are the most expensive investment that
Yeah.
that guy probably had put into him.
yeah, so
It's sad to think like that, though. That there's and I feel a majority of this country. That's how. Besides the big cities with budgets, I feel that's a lot of
Yeah.
departments or just don't have the funding.
yeah,
And that's what blew my mind with this whole defund the police thing. It was like, if anything, if you're trying to crack down and want cops to be better, less incidences, know their job more, know how to de-escalate, why would you not fund it more? The less training you have, the less qualified they are to do that job. That's
Yeah.
why it never made sense to me. It was like, okay, if I'm gonna bitch about something, and I want to, they don't know what they're doing. They need murder training, and all the reasons that not we, but the media and the left threw at law enforcement officers. It's like, okay, how do you fix it? You fund it. Then you make it so a law enforcement officer doesn't have an excuse. They've gone through all the intense training on de-escalating and weapons training and handling and all of that stuff. So when something does happen and it is the wrong choice, then they're held at a higher level.
Yeah.
Because if you had a Delta team running around out there and they were making those mistakes, those guys would be crucified. I mean, they'd be
Yeah.
done. I mean, so that was an interesting period for me watching all that. It never made any sense to me. It's like, well, if you want to get rid of them, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think, having those high standards, like when I worked for the Department of Energy, we had, if you were in a shoot house training, if you missed a target, you were off the team.
Really?
Yeah. We had they have a CQB school they send everybody to, and I can't remember, I think it's either 4 or 6 weeks. But you're in a shoot house pretty much 10 hours a day for, that much time. And the class right before me had a guy, last run of the day, they're like, hey guys, last run of the day, and they all be graduated, right? And there's one run where you come out of a room, you pop out into the hallway, and you got a 15-yard shot. Well, the number one guy pops out into the hallway, take that 15-yard shot. Number two guy bumps him, and he missed, and he was done.
Just like that.
So he had to go through the whole program all over again. And so I think if we had more accountability on things like that,
Yeah.
right? And obviously in law enforcement, there's a lot more to the job than just shooting.
For
right?
sure.
Just like, like the military, the shooting part's just like the 1%, but you got to be really good at it when it happens, when you have to
And
use
ready.
that. Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think a lot of guys are.
Yeah,
Because
and
it just comes down to basic training.
Yeah, and I've had people say, "Hell, you put too much into the shooting aspect of it because you only use your gun, 1%, 10% of the time, and you do everything else like 90+% of the time." But if you think about like the shootings, one bad shooting can bankrupt the city.
For sure.
It can cause riots, all kinds of issues, right? So I think that's why you have to be really good at combatives. You got to be really good, combatives when I'm talking about the physical aspects of it, like arrest techniques, the physical fighting, that kind of stuff, and then the shooting part, because those things can bankrupt. Those things are what cause lawsuits.
Is it? I mean, I probably already know this answer, but does it just come down to funding and helping with these?
Yeah, a lot of it's
departments?
just funding, and also priorities. I was never, and I say that, but not ever being in an administrative position. But I do have a basic understanding of, budgets, and budgets can be tight, and there's more to, like especially at the sheriff's department, they got to fund the jail, they fund courts, they fund, patrol. We got medical units in the jail. I mean, there's just a lot of things that have to be funded. But I think guys who have a high degree of shooting ability and combatives ability, they have the confidence, to me, to not overreact.
Which is a huge portion of that
Yeah.
of your job field is not overreacting.
Yeah, because otherwise you see guys that, some of these shootings that I've seen are guys who are like that cornered cat, right? They get cornered in a position, and then they don't have that confidence, so sometimes they overreact. But those are on some of the bad shootings. But overall, I would say most police officers don't shoot when they should.
Really?
I think there's a lot of more of underreaction, but that's also comes from not having the confidence to do what you got to do.
What do you mean by underreaction? Like waiting too long, or
Waiting too long. A lot of times you'll see police officers, they draw their gun on a bad guy because he has a gun, and they're like, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. And they sound like this broken record, and they're there for a long time. Another guy will roll up and going, how come nobody shot this guy? And they end up shooting the guy, right?
Do you think a lot of that has to do with just fear of being crucified and losing your job and ending up in prison because of it? I mean, now, me personally, I mean, I feel like, I mean, I'm coming home at the end of the day no matter what.
Yeah.
But now everything with the cameras and everything's recorded, and I feel being a cop to me is probably the worst job on the planet, personally. But nowadays, you have a split second to, if you're going to engage somebody or not. You don't know if it's a gun, a knife, even a weapon. It could be a phone, because this guy wants to record you, and then do you think a lot of that plays into that hesitation of taking that shot and ends up costing guys their life, or is it just lack of training?
I think a lot of it's just lack of confidence.
Okay.
Because of not having maybe enough training.
Got it.
I'm not sure I know bigger cities, that they fund the police, the BLM stuff, it's affected them a lot more than it has us here in Idaho.
Okay.
But it still had some effect.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it comes down to you, the individual officer, having the confidence to do your job correctly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel confident in your own abilities, you're probably going to hesitate to try to implement something.
I just watched a video a couple days ago. This guy had a woman at knife point in the house, and the cops couldn't get in the door, and the cop just busts the window open.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah, I
And they
did
get in
see
the
that.
house, and the guy's on the bed, and the cop just puts one right in the dude's face.
Yeah.
Like, I was like,
That was impressive.
I feel how it should have been. I mean,
Yeah.
you got a victim, you got a hostage situation.
Mm-hmm.
There's no put the knife down. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they screamed it a couple times as they went in the room, but that cop went right in there and almost point blank that dude right in the dome, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, and you got to be willing to, you hear all the time, officer safety, officer safety. Well, if you're always worried about your own safety, you're not going to do things like that, right? It's all about public safety, not officer safety.
For sure.
Public safety should be first. Officer safety is down at the bottom of the list.
Yep. I mean, that's why you're there.
Yeah.
Yep. So with all this training, and I don't know if there's any other topics you want to cover before we roll into what you're doing now. I mean, you seem like you took it really serious as far as knowledge, studying weapons handling, training, doing it on your own, and that helped you roll into the civilian world of what you're doing now. I mean, you have 30 years, correct, of law enforcement. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. From SWAT to gang units to patrol. So you've covered a lot of the checks when it comes to different departments and different, I guess, avenues you can take in the law enforcement world. Taking that now to the civilian world and what you're doing. And so I guess we could jump into that.
Yeah.
And how you even decided to, I mean, obviously you got out after 30 years of law enforcement, which thank you for your service. That is a commitment. And then to now giving back to the law enforcement community by training in the civilian world.
Yeah, so when I was early on in my career, I worked with a guy who's still a good friend of mine. His name is Jeff Sklar. And I was a new cop. I think I'd only been on for like 8 months or something when our agency hired him. And he'd recently out of the Marine Corps, and he was on I was never in the military, so I don't know all the terminology and stuff, but I know he was with a unit called Fast Company.
Okay.
And he was really, really good in, he was really big into shooting and tactics and that kind of stuff. And so he talked to me about that stuff. I was like, man, that's amazing. I would love to do that kind of stuff. And he was telling me about how they'd go to all these civilian shooting schools all over the country. And so we'd go out to the range and train, and he tried to teach me some of the shooting stuff. And that just really piqued my interest. And so kind of blame him for all the money I've spent on shooting and training.
It is not a cheap sport. Not a cheap sport.
Yeah. So anyway, I started doing that for a while, and then I saw that he got into instructing and teaching, and so I was like, man, he's kind of a mentor, so I kind of wanted to do some of the things that he was doing. So I got into the teaching aspect of it, teaching within my own department, because most of the police departments, they all kind of self-train themselves to a certain degree. They'll send somebody to like a firearms instructor school. You go and learn how to be a firearms instructor, and then you come back and you teach your own department on the things that you learned. It'll be everything from, they'll have a little bit of case law and use of force, knowing the law, so you know when you can use force, when you can't. And then they go into the physical aspect of how to hold a gun, how to shoot, and that kind of thing, and qualification scores and all that kind of stuff. But looking back, and I look at when I meet some young instructors, and I look back to how I was teaching, I'm not sure I really knew what I was doing, right?
Okay.
Because I was pretty much just repeating what was in the manual, right? But knowing how to actually shoot and diagnose, that's what's really important.
How so?
Because, you can take somebody take them shooting, and they're shooting, maybe they're missing. They're shooting low left, they're shooting high right, whatever. And you're just like, okay, well, grip the gun tighter. Or, hey, one of the things I remember is some guys are like, stop jerking the trigger. I'm like, well, what does that mean, right? How does somebody fix that? You need to be able to diagnose that and understand why people are shooting low left. Why are people missing? Look at their gun and diagnose exactly what they're doing, instead of just basically repeating something word for word that's out of the manual. And that's what a lot of what I see in law enforcement. That's what a lot of the guys do, especially when they're younger. As you get older and they start shooting more, start to understand it. So I think you as an individual need to be shooting at a higher level so that you understand how to diagnose people. You got to diagnose yourself first.
For sure. I feel like that should be the standard. I mean, if you're equal to the people you're instructing, I mean, how are you going to take everybody to the next level?
Yeah. So back then, I think we had to go to an instructor development class.
Okay.
So it had nothing to do with firearms. It was all about learning how to teach and put lesson plans together. And so you'd go to this class, they would assign you something, a topic, whatever, and then you'd have to write up a lesson plan back at your hotel room, or back at home. Then you'd show up the next day, you'd show your lesson plan on paper, and they would look at it. It's like, yeah, lesson plan. It's just like going to school. They put red check marks on it. It's like, hey, you need to change this, and this to make it look nice. And then you'd stand up and have this presentation.
Okay. Yeah.
And then they would sit back and grade you on your presentation, how you spoke, and all that kind of stuff. And then later, you go to like a 40-hour firearms instructor school where they talk about the mechanics of shooting and maybe a little bit of use of force and so forth. And then you come back and you're an instructor. But not knowing or not having a lot of experience is just basically 1 week of training with firearms plus another 30, 40 hours of instructor development. I think it's good, but at the time, when I look back, I was pretty much just repeating exactly what was in the manual. And
what year was this?
This was back in like 1997.
So a lot has changed since.
A lot's changed, yeah. Now I believe the firearms instructor school is 80 hours, and then that's after they do a 40-hour instructor development course on how to teach.
And I could just imagine tactics.
Yeah.
Everything is probably completely different now. That you've evolved. I mean, you got to watch that transition, obviously, coming through all the years of being, from back in the 90s to now. I mean, I'm sure it's night and day.
Yeah, I think things have changed quite a bit, but I think things have slowly changed. And now everything was really slow changing. And then all of a sudden, I think with social media and instructors all of a sudden started traveling around the country. We would bring instructors here, and all of a sudden people are starting to change a lot. Things are changing a lot faster for the better.
Okay.
But I think having somebody that's going to be an instructor, if you want to be a really good instructor, I think you have to master the skills first.
Absolutely.
Because I know a lot of people, they pretty much, like even to teach concealed weapons courses, I know a lot of people, they just go to like a weekend-long firearms instructor school by the NRA or USCCA, right? And then they're a firearms instructor. So just that in itself, to me, doesn't make you a good instructor. That might be that you're certified on paper, but does that make you a good instructor? I see the biggest problem I see is the instructors themselves haven't mastered. And I don't say you have to be a professional shooter or anything like that, but you should be a fairly high-level shooter to where when you're out on the shooting range, you explain something, right? Then you physically demonstrate it. If I want all my students to shoot a certain drill, like say, 2 shots to the body, 1 to the upper A zone, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to demonstrate it, maybe dry fire, I'll do it slow, live fire, and then do it fast, live fire, so
Yeah.
that people can see what they can achieve, right? And sometimes when you get to a certain level, even doing it slow sometimes is kind of hard because you're used to going a faster speed. But I think a good instructor can break it down so that other people can see what you're doing.
Absolutely. I've been fortunate enough to go to, a few schools over the years, and we have our PBL program where we have instructors that go and travel to law enforcement officers and help those guys and everything. But you can tell, like, if you've been around shooting and you know weapons handling, and it's funny because I'll show up sometimes and just watch and go to these classes or whatever, and it's just like I'm meeting. I'm like, oh God, here, like, it's more of the Instagram influencer instructor versus real. A guy that's done real world training, real world scenarios, because it's a completely different mindset. I feel like when I'm taking instructions from a guy that's actually done it, instead of just doing and wanting his class to just go through these crazy fun TikTok drills, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
and there's a major difference in that.
Yeah, I say some guys will just stand there. They'll tell
Yep.
their students how to do a specific drill, but they won't stand up and actually demonstrate it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you have an instructor who's not demonstrating live fire what he's asking you to do, there might be an issue there. That might be a clue.
It's something I've always thought funny is when they do it, and then it's like a turkey shoot. You see this instructor, and you're like, when you're shooting tighter
Yeah.
groups than the guy that's demonstrating it, I'm like,
Yeah.
I always found that pretty funny to do it. So, it is what it is. Each their own. But I mean, I guess it's what you're looking for is somebody that has mastered a skill. I mean, I feel like if you're going to be an instructor of anything, you should know what the hell you're talking about.
Yep. My son went through a police academy, and he said he's like, I'm on the shooting range. He goes, in my mind, I'm just saying, okay, just keep your mouth shut, say nothing, just do what the instructors tell you to do. Because my son, when he was younger, we used to shoot competitively. We were 3-gun competitors.
Okay.
And when he was like 14, 15, 16, I sent him to Fort Benning, Georgia, because they had a 3-gun program for kids.
Really?
Yeah. And so my son went there, and he had some of the best instructors in the
Yeah.
country.
Yep.
There was all the guys from the Army Marksmanship Unit. And so he'd shot a lot of competition when he was younger, and then he gets into police academy, and he's a pretty good shooter, and he ended up being the top shooter. But he said he had some instructors go by, and they'd look at the students' targets, and they'd say things like, "Stop jerking the trigger," and then just move on, and not stop to actually help the student. And my son said that he had guys going, "Hey, what does that mean? What does that mean exactly?"
Yeah.
And so he was trying not to get in trouble, right? He's just
Yeah.
like, but that was a good example of guys not really being a good instructor by not explaining. Like, you can give terminology, but that terminology, if you've never heard it before, it means nothing to you.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it would be better for that instructor to go over and going, "Hey, looks like you're jerking the trigger, and this is what I mean by it. Hey, this is, maybe get your gun out and have him look, watch your trigger finger, actually pulling the trigger so he can see how to do it properly."
Yeah.
But actually demonstrate, and don't just throw verbiage out there that new people don't know what they mean.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you see it now, and there's so many different new terms, and you see all these new. I'll watch a video every now and then. I'm like, what the hell is this dude talking? I've never even heard this in my life. And it's all new verbiage, or they try to come up with some cool acronym or something like that. It's just like, I feel, especially for beginners, for some mom and daughter that are looking to get some training. I mean, it's just starting with the absolute basics. How often are you doing, civilian classes?
So I do. I say now that I retired, I still teach. I still do some classes for law enforcement. Do some law enforcement courses, but I do probably more civilian courses than I do law enforcement. And I do probably 10 to 12 classes a year. I teach everything from the enhanced concealed carry class, which seems to be the class that's the most requested by people.
Really?
And then I'll do just like a pistol 101, pistol 102, basically just like an intermediate and a more advanced level course, everything from pistol. I do that with carbines, with an AR-15, do some shotgun classes as well. And they're all, the shotgun class is not like skeet shooting. It's more defensive oriented type of a class.
Really?
So all
How so? Like, what's in a shotgun class? What's involved in that?
what's funny is shotgun class is a lot of loading because, right, you shoot one, load one, shoot two, load two. And it's about learning how to load the shotgun, learning how to pattern a shotgun. What distance is buckshot good for? Is it good at 50 yards? Is it good at 20 yards? So forth. And at what point should you be using slugs versus buckshot or birdshot? That kind of thing.
So it's okay. So as an instructor, let's say we live out in the country, and I travel a lot, and I'm leaving it up to the wife and kids. What is your go-to home defense in that situation? Is it a shotgun? Is that more of a point down the hallway and let it rip, or you? What would be your go-to for if you had a wife? She's not a tactical woman. She's just your everyday wife. What's your go-to weapon if you were going to teach a husband or a wife and your kids to defend
I would say
themselves?
just a pistol because
Yeah?
it's easy to maneuver.
Okay.
Right? It's you can if you have a handgun in your hand, you can open doors, close doors. You can move down the hallway, around corners. It's just much easier to maneuver around inside of a home.
As far as beginner shooters for a pistol, what would you recommend for a beginner to pick up? What's your gun of choice for somebody that's getting into it? They want to learn. They want to be able to defend themselves. What's your go-to pistol?
You mean like brand or just caliber wise? A 9mm.
Okay.
I like 9mm because it doesn't recoil too much and the high capacity. Right?
I'm with you on that. I'm not
have
this.
15 to 21 rounds in a magazine. With the pistol.
Yep.
And there's a lot of good brands out there, everything from Glock to SIGs to Smith and Wessons. There's a lot of good brands. Main thing is, I tell people, if you're gonna buy a gun, and if it's something that, like, say 90% of the time, it's just gonna be a house gun. You're gonna keep it at home. It's nothing you're gonna carry with you. Just get a full size gun because full size guns are easier to shoot. One of the things I see a lot, ladies come to my class or new shooters come to a class, and their spouse or whoever will buy them a new gun to bring to class, and it's this little itty bitty, 9mm, and they have a hard time racking the slide because the springs are so tough on them. They shoot 40 to 50 rounds, and their hands are tired because the gun recoils so much because it's so lightweight. And so, if you have a full size gun that has a little bit more weight to it, that helps dampen the recoil. And so the smaller
Really?
guns
Okay.
are usually more difficult to shoot.
I've never considered that. I mean, obviously being.
Yeah.
I've never thought that. I mean, I feel like that's the first thing a guy would do is like, I'm going to get my wife a compact pistol.
Yeah, that's usually what I see. Get
Really?
a compact pistol, and it's usually got a, pink or blue or, something.
Tiffany blue
Yep,
or whatever.
I've seen a lot of those.
Yep.
But a lot of people think that, oh, I'm going to buy my wife this cute little gun, or the lady's like, oh, I like that gun. That's cute. I should be able to shoot that pretty easily because it's nice and small. But a lot of times they'll have the most difficult time.
So
with the
Glock
smaller guns.
19. I mean, I'm a Glock guy. Carried it overseas. I
Yeah,
carry
Glock
it here.
19 is a perfect size. Glock 19 or Glock 17.
Yep. And that's there's just an easy
Yeah.
all around. I feel it's just a point and squeeze,
Yeah.
and you're ready to
The
rock.
only
and
problem
roll.
I've seen with Glocks is sometimes the grip's a little bit big for a lot of people with smaller hands
Okay.
and women.
So what would you
So,
suggest then? I mean,
I
what has a smaller grip?
Smith and Wessons have
Okay.
seem to have a more ergonomic grip. Canic's pretty good. Like I say, a lot of it, I tell people, go find yourself a full-size gun, or at least a mid-size, like a Glock 19 to Glock 17 size, and go to the store, pick it up, and see what feels good in your hand.
Now, if somebody signs up for one of your courses, do you offer different pistols for them to try, or do they have to have that figured out by the time
People
they get
don't
to you?
have to have their own.
Okay.
I do provide them for them at no cost.
Okay.
To use it, they just have to bring their own ammo. But I don't have a lot of different guns. People think that because I'm a gun guy, I have hundreds of guns, but I really don't have that many guns. But the guns I do have, I will provide for people. I'll let them shoot. In the
So if they
class.
do want to try something different,
You have Glocks and a couple Smith and Wessons, or Smith and Wesson like 22. I got some SIGs, 9mm that people can shoot. So
for just your beginners, where do they start?
well, first you got to find a good instructor,
Okay.
right? And I
What are
think
they
that's the
looking
hard part.
for? I mean, if I'm brand new, I just moved here from California. I'm sure
That's
there's a lot.
crazy.
I'm sure there's a lot of those that you're getting. Just moved here. They now live in Idaho. You can carry a gun. Where do I even start as far as finding an instructor and going about it?
That's pretty tough. But I think some of the best things you can do is probably go to a gun store, and I'm not talking about like Shields, which I'm sure they have their own programs stuff. But I think it's better to go to some of these local gun stores, more like mom and pop gun stores. I call them. Like there's Hawk Tech Arms. You got Idaho Arms and Ammo. Some of these smaller stores, even I think Boise Black Rifle. People that kind of have gotten to know people in the community.
Okay.
And because I think by word of mouth, is usually the best, because people, hey, I've gone to this class and I recommend you should go to it. And a lot of those instructors will hang around some of these smaller stores, or they know people who've gone to their classes. And
That makes
those are
sense.
recommendations.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you're just looking at a name on a website and going, well, it says he's certified, so he must be good because he's certified. Nowadays you get a lot of people that, even myself, put some of your shooting stuff on Instagram so people can see what you do. I know a handful of firearms instructors here, even locally. They have these Instagram posts, and they might show themselves working out, or posing with a gun, but I don't ever see them shooting. I think that's a clue. If these people are firearms instructors and they do a little bit of marketing, and you don't see them actually shooting, they're just standing there with a gun or posing with a gun or doing a workout or something that's not really gun related, that should be a clue. Maybe their skills are not up to what they're supposed to be.
So you're looking for instructors that are actually running drills. And,
Yeah.
You're able to, if you're going the social media route, look for an instructor that's running drills.
Yeah, because you want to be able to see their own skill. They should be confident in their own skill and go, okay, well, maybe he got to a certain point because he had proper instruction and then went out and practiced on his own. And you want an instructor who's not just going to run you through this class, but you want an instructor who can diagnose your shooting,
Yep.
and then going to send you home with some homework. Because these classes are about, because you're only going to get so much better in a one-day class, right?
For sure.
So you need to be able to go to this class as a student and go, okay, I'm going to go there so that I can learn how to train myself.
Mm-hmm.
So next time I go to the shooting range, I can apply some of the things I learned from that last class. And I think that's the biggest mistake that, even myself have done, going to a class and you think, oh, this class is going to make me better. And then you go to another class, it's going to make me better. And you keep going to these classes, and a year later, you're still not that much better because you're not doing the homework in between.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to take some notes when you go to these classes, and make sure you take that with you and think of it as homework on things that you can practice on your own, so that you can actually get better.
So once I find the instructor, I go to a small mom and pop. I mean, you said Hawk Tech. I've bought and done a lot of things through Hawk Tech. Those are a great company. But say you go there, they recommend you. What am I looking for my wife and kids? I'm just going to use wife and kids, right, as
Sure.
my scenario. When I'm calling an instructor, what am I going to be asking for, and what am I looking to put my wife and kids in so they can protect themselves? Like, what are the basics at the beginner classes?
Yeah, I mean, find out, hey, are you just teaching an advanced level class? Do you teach basic classes? Heck, do you even teach kids? Like some people won't teach kids. Right?
Really?
So you got to kind of, what is it that you want out of it?
Yeah.
Ask the instructor, hey, what is it that you provide? Like you said, do you provide the guns for them? Do you provide ammo? What kind of equipment do we need? And, maybe ask him about his curriculum. Do you actually have a curriculum that you've written up? Do you have a curriculum that I can look at? What kind of techniques? And maybe ask them what their background is. Ask the instructor, where did you get your certification? How long you've been shooting? Are you, and a lot of times also some of the things I see is some guys will say, oh, well, I was in the military, I was in law enforcement, so you should come to me, right? And they use that as their marketing. But I always tell people, it doesn't matter what you did 10 years ago, what can you do today, right? So, when I'm not teaching, one of my jobs is I work security for a private school. And I hire other people to help me at times. And I've had guys come to me and go, hey, I was in law enforcement, I was in the military, I can help you out if you need the help. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your shooting skill like? And we'll go to the range, and I'm like, well, your shooting skill is really not up to par. It's like,
especially for that environment.
yeah, I'm like, I don't care if you were, Delta or SEAL 10 years ago, but what can you do today? Where's your skills at today? So find out where that instructor's skills are at. Is he just using the title of, oh, I was in law enforcement or I was in the military 10 years ago, so come to me because I know what I'm doing? Because we both know that in itself doesn't mean that you know what you're doing. Right?
Which is funny because a lot of people think because you're in the military, you're just this incredible shooter.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've gone to the range before where I've seen people that couldn't even qualify. And you're just like, what the hell, And I was in that when I went to Afghan, we had a lot of law enforcement that we were in training with that were in our class. And there was a huge chunk of them that ended up getting dropped from the course because of their basic weapons handling skills, flagging dudes. We had a couple that had NDs on the range, and they were all law enforcement cops. And I was blown away, like, holy shit. Like, you just think because you're a cop, you know how to handle a weapon, or you're Oh, this guy's a Marine. What the fuck did he do in the Marines? You know, I've had guys be like, oh, what do you think of this gun? And I'm like, I've never heard of it. They're like, well, you were a Marine, right? I'm like, yeah, I got a shitty ass Beretta, an M4 with iron sights, and I was a heavy machine gunner. Like that's it. They think because you're in the military that you're shooting you're some YouTuber that has experience with every single firearm out there,
Yeah.
and that's far from. I mean, and most guys don't even get that. It's just
Yeah, they don't realize that, hey, you shoot what was issued to you, not necessarily what you wanted
a
to
couple
shoot.
of times a year if
Yeah.
they're lucky. I mean, you could be some Marine admin that goes to the range once a year to qualify just to get promoted, and that's it, you know. And so it's you definitely can't take someone's background or their previous job qualifications
Yeah.
and automatically make you a firearms instructor or anything really.
Yeah.
I've seen that quite a bit.
Yeah, so it is kind of hard, you know, because you can look on, you know, the Ada County Sheriff's website. They have a concealed weapons page where you can look and see what instructors that they have kind of certified or they have approved to teach concealed weapons courses. And I remember when I first started doing that, you know, 15, 20 years ago, I think there was like 3 of us or something. And now it's been a while since I looked on there, but it seemed like there was like 100 people on there last time I looked.
Really?
So I don't know what all these people's backgrounds are. I know a few other instructors that not necessarily teach concealed weapons permits, but they teach firearms training that are good instructors. And, you know, some of them are law enforcement, some of them are not. Some guys are competitive shooters. There's a guy that teaches Combat Absolutes, the name of his company, who's a firearms instructor or a police officer out of California, and he teaches out here now. I went through one of his classes. People were like, oh, why are you in this class? Aren't you an instructor? I was like, well, I want to continue to learn.
For
You know,
sure.
and that's what you want, is you want an instructor who's going to continue to learn. And you can't just go, okay, I'm an instructor level, so I don't have to learn anything anymore, right? Everything is continual learning. And so if your instructor is not one who, you know, maybe ask him, hey, when's the last time you went to a class other than your instructor certification? You know, do you do continuing education for yourself?
Yeah.
I think that's a good
That's a
question. to
huge
ask
one
him.
because I
Yeah.
mean I feel shooting especially is one of those things you don't use it, you lose it. Long gun, I mean, I shoot obviously a lot more long gun, so I don't ever really get out of that cycle.
Sure.
But with pistol, there's times I'll go out with the girls and be like, God damn, you know,
Yeah,
you
pistols
know,
probably is the most difficult out of all the weapons to shoot, right?
I feel carbine, long gun. It's just that that's ingrained in my DNA of who I am as a shooter. But pistol's one of those things. I'll go a while without shooting it, and I go to pick up and run a drill. I'm like, oh shit, okay, I got to knock the dust off a little bit. Then I'm slow everything down. Okay, like let's go back to the basics. Squeeze, you know. I run my drill in my head, like my process, and it takes me a little bit to get back into it sometimes. And I feel like as an instructor, it could be the exact same thing, especially if you're running course after course after course, and you're not on the range or you're not going to other clinics, visiting other instructors. I mean, you can find yourself probably not much often than the students you're teaching.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I first started teaching, you know, law enforcement. A lot of guys like, oh, you just want to be a firearms instructor so you can shoot all the time. I was like, man, I shoot less now because you have to get there early. You got to set up the range, right? Then you're teaching. Then you get done. Then you got to put stuff away, that kind of stuff. And so all that takes away from your own training.
And then when in the off time, the last thing you want to do is go do it again because
Yeah.
you've been doing it all week.
Yeah.
You want to go back to the range. So
Yeah.
I can definitely
Yeah, so you have to have
understand
the
that.
discipline to push yourself to, hey, I got to make time to go
Yep.
out and shoot and train on my own. But yeah, going back to what you were asking, you know, what kind of things should I ask
Yeah.
as a new shooter, you know, as far as finding a good instructor? Well, I think trying to find somebody who's been to that class. Go to some of these stores and say, hey, you know, if they recommend an instructor, say, hey, do you have any references? Do you have any other people that have been to your class? I think that's the best thing, you know. But it's kind of hard when you're new. You moved here from California, don't know a lot of new people,
Yeah.
a lot of new friends. But I think that's probably one of the best things you can do is go out and ask for references and find other people who've been to that person's class.
Oh, cool.
And then find out, like I said, when you talk to the instructor, let him know what it is you're looking for. Are you looking for an intermediate, advanced level course? Are you looking for a defensive course, a competition course? Or like, hey, I need an instructor who can teach someone who's never shot a gun before. They need to be taught how to hold the gun. They need to know how to aim, how to pull the trigger. They need to know the basics from the ground up. And do you teach those kinds of things?
How long should that class be? I mean, from a basic, I feel a 1 day class isn't enough. If I was teaching my wife and kids and we're going to go shoot, I mean, obviously it's going to be a day by day thing, but I mean, if somebody's like, "Oh, I can get you spun up in a day," is that a red flag, or is that something that you're confident
No,
with?
I think a 1 day course, and a lot of it too is like I've done 8 hour courses
Okay.
that we end up cutting at 6.5 hours because people's attention span, especially if you're outside in the weather, all my classes are outside. So you're either really cold or you're really hot, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you start to see people's attention span start to, drop a little bit. And for safety wise, then you're like, okay, we're going to have to stop the class just because we don't want anybody shot on the range, right? Because people are new to the gun handling, stuff like that. You're talking about people flagging or pointing their gun accidentally at other people. We just can't have that on the range. So, but that's why it's important to go to these classes. I would say most of my classes are 1 day courses.
Okay.
But that's why it's important to go there and go, hey, I'm going to learn as much as I can. I need to take notes, or I need the instructor to help me to send me home with some homework.
Yeah.
Right? Because you need to be able to, and then maybe come back at another time. But I do think that, 1 day is not enough. Just taking the enhanced concealed carry course is not enough. And unfortunately, most people think that it is. Trying to get people to come back to other courses, I would say out of the, let's say out of everybody who comes through an enhanced concealed carry course, people who return for more advanced level training is probably maybe 20%.
Really?
Yeah. And so a lot of it has to do with people. You gotta want it, right?
For sure.
But there's a lot of people, in the gun world who have a really high interest but low commitment level to training, right? Those are the guys who are like, they're collectors but not shooters,
Okay.
right? And
There's definitely a difference.
yeah, there's a difference between someone who actually shoots a lot. I shoot competitively a little bit, and some of the guys I shoot with, and there's right here in Idaho, we have some of the best shooters in the country.
Oh.
And shoot USPSA, United States Practical Shooting Association. I'll go down and shoot a few matches a year. I try to shoot 10 or 12 matches a year, so that I can supplement my concealed carry training. And that's basically why I started shooting competitively. I think guys who shoot competitively are your higher level shooters because they it's their hobby, right? Instead of going golfing, these guys are going to the range to shoot on the weekends. And I know some of these guys here locally shooting 50,000+ rounds a year, going to 20, 30, 40, 50 matches a year.
And I feel like some of those guys, most of them are just civilians, and they will outshoot anybody I've
Yeah,
ever
they
known
are.
in my life. Some of the best shooters I've ever met in my life, zero military, zero law enforcement experience. They're just that's their hobby, that's their world.
Yep.
And I've gone out and been like, holy fuck, like the gear, the knowledge, just listening to them on if they load their own rounds,
Yeah.
everything that these guys do, and they're
Yeah, and that goes from pistol shooting right to the long range shooters. The guys who do the long range shooting, those guys are phenomenal. It's usually just civilian shooters. I was never in the military, but even in law enforcement, we would hire competitive shooters to come in and train some of our guys, like SWAT team. Like we've had
Yeah.
JJ Rakaza down.
I love
you know.
JJ. JJ's one of our
Yeah.
instructors for our
Okay.
PBL program. I've known JJ for probably a
Yeah,
decade
I
now.
had him out here 3 years in a row.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, and he did some training for us. But talking to guys who are, tier one guys, they say, yeah, we bring in these civilian guys like JJ. They bring in, a lot of guys like him to come in and train them.
He's so easy to work with too. I mean,
Yeah,
he's so mellow. He's incredible. He speaks the language. It's very easy to follow along. Yeah, he's a great guy, but he's a civilian guy.
Yeah.
And he's one of the top shooters in the world.
yeah, those are the guys. Like I said, we got guys that are maybe not as famous as him, but we got some guys that are pretty high level shooters like he is locally. And I like to go train with these guys. And so I always tell people ask me, how do I become a better shooter? I tell people, go out and compete. You don't have to make it every single weekend, but if you go out and compete, 2, 3, 4 times a year, that really shows you at what level you're at. And that's why I go, so that I can supplement my, defensive carry, concealed carry.
What are some of the competitions then? What are some of the, because there's leagues. What do you call, are they leagues?
Yeah, they're just leagues. They
So
got
what
local.
would you start as a beginner if I want to get my kids into it?
Yeah, best thing is just show up and shoot.
Which ones? There's several
the
different
US
ones, right?
To me, my favorite, and I think the one that's most applicable to concealed carry, is the USPSA, United States Practical Shooting Association, and that's you'll get online, you can look that up, and you'll see some courses of fire. Basically, you shoot one person at a time, goes up, and they'll have a course of fire where you run from point A to point B to point C. You might shoot anywhere from 6 to 12, 14 targets depending on the course of fire.
Is it majority pistol?
Well, that is USPSA, and you can also
Okay.
shoot what they call PCC, pistol caliber carbine, And so guys will be shooting like an AR-15 that shoots a 9mm, and you're doing a lot of the same courses of
okay.
fire.
And you get to see real quick where you're
Yeah.
standing with
Yeah,
the,
you get to see, you sit there and talk about how good of a shooter you are. Well, let's go out and prove it,
yeah.
you know. But
fun
there
to
is,
see real quick.
there's more than just being a good shooter. You can be a really extremely good shooter and still not place at the top because you got to know the game part of it, right? Like they call reading a stage. Like you stand there and go, okay, because they tell you basically where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you can go right, you can go left, you can start in the center. It's up to you to kind of strategize and make a plan in what order you're going to shoot the targets in and which is going to be the fastest. Because what they do is they don't just look at your accuracy, they look at your speed as well. So it's basically the winner is whoever can score the most points the fastest.
So you're getting judged on two different calibers.
So you're getting judged on two things, which is speed and accuracy. And you can't have one without the other, or you're not going to win. Right?
How do you feel about the like the tactical games? Like, what are your thoughts on that type of training?
I've never done it. I've just seen it, and I've always kind of wanted to try it.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like I'm always injured somehow. But I think it's good.
Yeah.
I think it's it just kind of shows your overall physical fitness along with some
sure.
shooting. The
For
shooting,
sure.
from what I've seen, seems a little bit different. It seems like more like bullseye
Yeah.
type shooting where you're shooting groups and stuff. Not so much a run and gun like USPSA or 3-gun.
Yeah, I went out to that one this summer up by Rupert or Burley, and I didn't compete in it. Those days are gone with me, right? But I was watching those men and women compete, and it was fuck that. Like they had these guys dragging these plates with sandbags piled on them. And I mean, it wasn't like, 20, 30 yards. I mean, it was like 150 yards down, turn around, drag this thing back, then run a stage, and then the other partner had to drag it while another dude's carrying this giant. I was watching these guys. I'm like, God, I would have thrown up 100 times by now. I mean, in my peak days, I think they would have been in the most fun shit ever to do. But yeah, then you watch them. I mean, you want to talk about knowing where your physical level is,
Yes.
and then being able to shoot that exhausted is a whole other level, than standing, stationary and running
Yeah.
a station. But yeah, it was pretty fascinating. I mean, those competitors are on
Yeah,
a
I think
different
you
level
definitely
for
have
sure.
to have a different skill set. As in, you got to be able to shoot bullseye type shooting.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
They want you to be able to stack rounds on top of each other, where you're
Mhm.
not. It's not necessarily a run and gun course of fire. It's like you do a bunch of physical fitness, run up to a certain position, take a few deep breaths, and then
Yeah.
slow fire some
Yep.
shots. At least that's from what I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty demanding. Well, so people are trying to get a hold of you, or with the masses that are moving here and need
Yep.
a good instructor. How do we find you? What's the name of your company? Let's make sure we get all that out there. So if anybody is interested,
I have a website. I'm not the best about keeping up my website, but is idaho1032.com.
Okay.
So go to idaho1032.com and you can see the different courses that I have scheduled. And if you look on the calendar, you're like, oh, there's no courses this month or whatever. People can just get a hold of me and say, hey, I got 5 or 6 people, family members or friends. We want such and such class. When can we do it? And we just set up a date and do it. I would say that's the majority of my classes. I get a lot of people just call, and so that's why sometimes my calendar looks empty, but it's because it's full, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'm not. People are just calling me and setting up courses for them and
Nice.
their families, and so we'll just set something up.
So
But
you can do one-on-ones like with
Yeah, I can
families
do-
that want to just
yep.
come and have the range with you
I
and
do private one-on-one or private group classes
Okay.
for families or for companies. I've had some small companies that have like 10, 12 employees set up a class for them. I've done everything from 20, 30 law enforcement guys to just one individual person who wants to learn how to use a gun.
Got it.
And so
Okay.
go to idaho1032.com and you can see the courses of fire. Or if you see something on there going, hey, I wonder if he offers this, call and ask me. We can probably set something up. I do a lot of custom courses. One of the bigger things I have coming up as far as law enforcement wise, I'm doing like a small law enforcement conference come May 20th, 29th. And we're going to be doing that at the Double Tap Range, and it's for law enforcement only. We're going to invite vendors out, but we're going to have 3 classes. We're going to have a mechanical breaching and a ballistic breaching class where people are breaching doors with like shotguns, using battering rams, hooligan tools, And then we're going to have a handgun class that's being taught by Yong Lee, who's a 5-time grandmaster and a former SWAT guy.
Really?
And then Benny Cooley, who's going to be teaching a rifle class, carbine, AR-15 type class. And he's a former DOE SWAT guy and won 15 world championships in shooting
Really?
sports.
So you got some heavy hitters
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, and Corey Feldman's one of our Ada County SWAT guys.
Yep.
And so he's going to be doing the breaching part.
Cool.
And guys will have to sign up for, it's going to be just 2 days, so guys will have to sign up for breaching and handgun or, carbine pistol. So they'll just pick 2 of those classes to go to. Then hopefully on the end of day 1, I'm going to try to have an evening where guys just come in and debrief some of the shootings they've been involved in. So
That's actually pretty cool.
yeah.
Is this the first time doing
Yep,
it?
it'll be
Oh,
the
nice.
First time doing that. Yeah.
Nice.
So that one's going to be law enforcement only. Like I say, most of my business is civilian classes.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to try to, hopefully the next couple of weeks, I'll have some classes up on my website. At least once a month, I'll be holding some type of class, either enhanced concealed carry, intermediate pistol, or carbine class. So, and then on Instagram, I have an Instagram page where I just I'll post some of the competitions I go to, some drills that I'm shooting at the range, or on occasion you'll see a class posted there.
What's your Instagram handle there?
1032 Firearms Training.
Okay.
That's 1032 _ firearms training _ training.
What's 1032? That's cop code.
Yeah, 1032 is old cop code. It means man with a gun.
Okay.
So it's something that we don't really even use anymore.
That's creative. I like that.
Yeah, so I was just trying to find, what's something that's not just shooting, training, so 1032. So people go, hey, I went to a 1032 class. That's a man with a gun class. So
That's cool. That's creative. I like that. Is there anything we're missing out that you want the people to know beforehand?
no, just reach out. Like I say, people can go to my website, and if they see a class on there that they want, request it, or if there's something on there that they don't see, reach out and request it as well.
Cool. We'll make sure everything's tagged and on all the YouTube and all the MySpace and all that good stuff these days. So
I had one of those MySpace. Yeah.
I joke around with her every now and then, or I'll have somebody come along and be like, "Where do I find you?" I'm like, "Well, here's my MySpace," and they look at you like. I had this woman not too long ago. I said that to, and she's like, "It's back." I'm like, "Oh man, it's better than ever." And she was like, "Oh my god, I used to use that." I'm like, "It's not back," but yeah, she has no idea when we say MySpace. But
Yeah.
no, well, thanks, dude. I appreciate you coming on and spreading the word and what to look for as an instructor and as far as beginners and everything, and just thank you for your service in the community. I know 30 years is a long time to commit,
Yep.
especially here right in your old hometown and home state. So thank you for everything you've done for us and keeping the streets safe. I
Well,
appreciate
thanks for having
it.
me on. Appreciate
yeah,
it.
always, man. Thank you again.
Thanks.
There we go, man.
Well, I hope that turned out okay.
I think it's gonna be great.
Yes.